Right. Before I ask for questions, I'm going to ask our speakers the question that I did raise earlier. It's a wide question. Why are we worried about pollution from runoff? Can you give me some really hard-hitting facts or examples or case studies or histories? Anyway, right, and this is really to address the people who aren't here as well. The skeptics who just don't believe that this really is, we're going through it.
Do you want me to jump in? Well, having been to okay. Having been to the United States of America on 2 sustainable drainage case studies, if there isn't a problem, then they've spent an awful lot of money or wasted an awful lot of money addressing a problem that doesn't exist. Let me tell you how far it's gone in America. In some states, in some sensitive areas, they've even got a term called superficial cleaning, even using sonication, which is sound, to remove contaminants. They've got a lot of plant that's evolved. Some of them are just simple vacuum plant that will clean, after a dry spell, it will clean a sensitive highway of contaminants before it rains. And that includes, and imagine this for us, when we grit or salt the roads in the winter in a sensitive area, imagine what that does when it rains. That's like napalm on the water course or the balancing pond or whatever. In some parts of America, they will try and remove as much of that contamination as they can before it rains. Now, if there isn't a problem, then somebody somewhere has got it very, very wrong. But from everything I've seen, and again, I'm not a chemist. I said earlier, Dr. John Sansaloni, put us firmly in our place. But I have seen people with far more knowledge in this subject than I have, and I've been humbled by what I don't know about the problem. So throw that out there for. Right, that's an intellectual authority, but the Americans know what they're doing, and they're doing that. Got any examples of actual damage?
Yeah.
Go for it.
It's in America again, unfortunately. I also went on a jolly to America several years ago. And one of the places we went to was Maryland, which have always been seen as one of the leaders in, well, they call it best management practices. And the reason that there is a drive in Maryland to install sustainable drainage systems or best management practices is because the pollution from surface water drainage is one of the causes of degradation of the Chesapeake Bay. And there's lots of crabs live in the Chesapeake Bay, and the Americans like eating crab cakes, particularly in Maryland. It's a local delicacy. And what they found was that the pollution was affecting the crab population. So there is in certain areas there are clear indicators of damage, and I'm sure the Environment Agency have got more in this country. But in that is the other thing that did bring out was that there's been a massive information campaign, and that focus that it's damaging the crab population. You can't eat crab cakes anymore, or there aren't as many of them. That focus has actually helped the uptake of these systems, certainly around Maryland, and even to the extent that you've got gully. By a lot of gullies now, it says "Don't pour oil; it goes to the bay," or similar slogans. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do in this country. We need to focus on that public information and public education, so that these things are more widely accepted.
Are we getting more convinced? How about the Environment Agency?
I suppose. Well, as a couple of things. The Highways Agency has spent a couple of £1 million developing the HORAT tool, which some of you hopefully will have heard of. It's a risk assessment for their runoff and where they were installing their sort of SUDs. So they believe it, and we've made some very good water quality improvements around that. And also, when we've done assessments for the water bodies' failures, reasons for failure, you saw some of the data up there. Let's say 1,200 water bodies are failing from urban diffuse, and we estimate that round about half of that are from runoff problems. So it could be, you know, at least 6, maybe 800 water bodies failing for, that we've got evidence for, failing from runoff problems. So the evidence is clear, it's there.
When we talk about failure, if I know nothing about water quality and I'm on highway side, what does failure mean?
Well, under the Water Framework Directive, you can fail for chemical or ecological failure. So if there's an absence of little bugs and things like that, then you'll fail for sort of ecological failure. You can also fail for certain chemicals as well. So it can fail for either of those. I think how many parameters is there, Damian? I can't exactly remember the number, but it's a one out, all out. So if you fail, if it fails for ecological status, then it fails for everything. You see, so so that it's failing on both, and you'll see from the when you get in the urban runoff, you're seeing it can fail for things like copper, but it will generally fail for ecological status. So you're getting sort of no life in the river, or not an acceptable level of ecology. Yeah.
Are we getting happy? Do you think they've made a convincing case for by pollution? Sir.
In fairness to the water companies, gullies and highway drainage, it's not their remit. In many ways, you could spin it around. And I guess these are some of the conclusions that we developed with Richard Ashley when we came back from America was, you know, whose surface water was it? You know, a gully actually drains for free into, in many instances, a public sewer. So it's down to the highway authority, the highways agency, the people who own that gully and maintain it in perpetuity to do so. I think, I mean, perhaps we can throw this out to the floor. I think, you know, back in the day, as you say, when I was back in local authority, when I worked in a drainage maintenance department, we had a budget for that. We had the plant there. We had our own plant. I did, it was Dudley MBC, I worked essentially for Severn Trent Water, but on highway drainage schemes, that wasn't for Severn Trent Water, that was for Dudley MBC because we had a budget for highway drainage, and out of that budget came the gully emptying programme. I would imagine now, you know, working with clients in local authority, that it's very, very difficult to ring fence that budget, and there are probably pressures elsewhere, and that money has been spent. And I know that there are authorities who've just almost sort of turned a blind eye and will only react to cleaning gullies when there's a flooding problem. But for every gully that stops working, that's exacerbating the issues elsewhere. Not just pollution, but flood risk. We've seen some of the images. You know, if water's not getting into the system, then it's going to become, you know, an overland flow. The overland flow will build up and build up and build up, and it will cause a problem somewhere. So I absolutely agree with you. And you know, for me, a real backward step, a retrograde step, was back in the 90s when local authority lost the drainage agencies, and that expertise was lost from where it should be, which is in the local authority. I was there, I saw it coming, I moved out to a consultancy, and I know a lot of colleagues did. Some went to the water companies, but a lot of them just left, and that expertise is not there. You know, again, you look back at some of the American case studies and you can see that, you know, within the city, they have drainage people. They have their own budgets. They're ring fenced, and they have the expertise there. And I think that's probably where we need to get back to: ring fence money for maintenance and the necessary skills to be able to identify it as well.
I think this is going to be a recurrent issue about the maintenance side of things. Because I'm sure you will say, well, all this sun stuff is all very well. What about the maintenance? Just a short circuit. This maintenance issue. council saying that they're thinking about stopping road maintenance. There's a duty under the Highways Act 1980 to maintain the roads, and it's an absolute duty. They have to do it, or they will end up paying claims. There's a Burnside versus Emerson precedent that was confirmed again by the DHR versus Cumbria and Council Moss in, I think, 2005, 2006. Someone will know what it is. It confirms that the duty to maintain the road, maintain the highway, includes the maintenance of the drainage system. Full stop. So there will be pressures on local authorities to cut back its maintenance side of things. But if you want to, you can use these precedents and the duties established by the Highways Act 1980 to undertake funding. And that's where the ring fencing comes in. It's an absolute duty imposed by Parliament.
Yeah, we're also going to discuss maintenance as well this afternoon, so the reason to stick around for the last discussion. Yeah, just a point on that. I'm strong believer that the skill on Scotland, we are trying to look at assessment that people's time on the much less impact than we do on the sector and money. That's all about prioritizing the overall
Prioritisation point. Any thoughts?
Well, some of our case studies, some of our good sales have actually been in Scotland. So there is obviously a need with CIRIA for this, for the proprietary technology. I know it's been retrofitted as well as new built. So there's obviously still a need in Scotland. Yeah.
While we're on the funding side of things, I think you also made the point that in new build, that the subsystems can work out cheaper than a conventional drainage system. Is everybody convinced? Do people want to question that? Any unbelievers? That's good.
Yeah, I mean, there are case studies. There's certainly been case studies in the past. I think there are some in the SUDS manual. Certainly HR Wallingford did work on whole life costing of various systems. On Interpave's website, they've done a very comprehensive comparison between a series of sites, different types of sites using concrete block permeable paving and a normal drainage system. And then I think they got Scott Wilson's to design those schemes, and then got a quantity surveyor or a cost consultant, whatever they're called these days, to actually price it up. And in all but one case, I think it was either cheaper or cost neutral. We did some work for DCLG on driveways when they brought the legislation about paving driveways in a few years ago. The impact assessment for that shows that the construction is generally cost neutral, the same. So there is evidence out there, but I think one of the issues I have is people want this magic number. How much does a swale cost? How much does a pond cost? You will never ever have a number like that. It is entirely site specific, and you need to do a cost comparison on a site specific basis. But it has got to be a proper SUD system, as I said, not an end-of-line wetland or pond that is a big hole in the ground, because that will be more expensive.
There's also, on the SUDS website, there's also a number of case studies on there. One of them is the Land Road, which has been heavily monitored, looking at the performance there. And within there, they're talking about a 10% saving in terms of capital costs for that. And the issue, or the good thing with that, is that that was a retrofit done properly in early consultation, I suspect those savings would be greater. There's also, on the SODS website, if you go to performance at the bottom, there's also access to a number of the DEFRA case studies that looked at a comparison. So there is growing evidence, but it's such a feat to get SUDS in the ground. You find that monitoring and capturing costs tends to be one of the last things that gets done. So if you are doing SUDS schemes, it would be great to capture that information because it will save the heartache in the future.
An interesting thing that happened to me the other day, and it's not solid evidence because it's not published, but we designed a scheme using those shallow plastic boxes, all designed as source control, had some permeable pavement in there, and had irrigation to trees. And the contractor had never seen this before, came in, don't like that, told the client it was a load of rubbish, it was unbuildable, and told the client how expensive it was and that he would design him, he would value engineer the scheme to produce a drainage system that did the attenuation but would be cheaper. He's now a bit embarrassed because the client is asking him questions why his value engineered scheme is more expensive than the proper SUD system. So there is a lot of evidence there. But just one other point, Lamb Grove actually has multifunctional areas. Part of the open space, and it's part of the play area as well, isn't it, from memory? Part of the play area is actually a basin for attenuating water. And that's the kind of thing that we need to think about. So not only do we have to get professionals out of their own silos, we actually start having to take land use out of its silo mentality as well. Because without that, you won't get successful schemes.
And I think a key issue is, not forgetting, for example, a developer who's going to be putting a lot of money into a site, and there has to be a return on that development, to make it worthwhile. And this will hopefully be a function of the SUDS approving body when it comes in, is thinking early enough, planning early enough, getting the landscape architect together with the drainage engineer, the site master planner, getting everybody to work together and making space for SUDS on a development as early as possible. And where it is a problem, where there is a tipping point for the economic return, that everybody acknowledges that for a particular site, perhaps something does need to be covered because you need to build over it. So, and again, it's this, there is not one size fits all.
Very interested with this morning's session across the piece. I think it's vital that we include consideration of urban areas within the national capital systems and services I have a very specific question for Steve. I found it fascinating. That's all. That's what I heard.
We all breathe a sigh of relief.
You know, the stuff that you said about you made a very strong statement that permeable pavements have good pollution removal capacity. So my question, sort of in general, is what's happening to the pollution? Is it accumulating in the permeable pavements? Because although I can imagine you might get some microbial destruction of hydrocarbons, they're not going to do that to heavy metals. So what's happening?
I'm glad you asked an easy question. Well, you're right. Essentially, the hydrocarbons, they get trapped within the aggregate, either in the joints or within the subbase, or if there are geotextiles in there, that will help, possibly. But essentially, the hydrocarbons, the day-to-day hydrocarbon pollution will degrade, and there's a lot of work being done at Coventry and worldwide as well that demonstrates that that is the case. You can, if you get a spillage, the hydrocarbons can wash through it, but again, if you've got a treatment train, so you've got other follow-on SUDs beyond the permeable pavement, they will deal with that. And again, there's evidence that is the case. The metals, yeah, they will get trapped in there. The majority of the metals will be trapped, will be attached to the soot particles, which will get trapped in the system. And until and that's the same with any sustainable drainage system. I've got another presentation I do about silt, because people have a big issue about silt being captured in suds, but that is their primary function. That is what they're there for. The main reason that suds and source control work, though, is because you're keeping it spread out. You're not putting a big silt load into a small area. So, yeah, the metals, everything else stays there. And until we stop putting metals into the environment, I don't see that we can do anything else but that. My view, and other people might disagree with this, is that I'd rather have those metals in a place where I know they are, where they're not particularly an issue, rather than uncontrolled entry into water courses, into groundwater, for example.
That's what I thought you would say, right, as I asked it, sort of question.
Nice.
That then brings a very interesting point, that really anything that traps silt could be considered as part of a subsystem, if you're looking across the different parts of the treatment system.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's got to trap silt. It's got to trap it consistently, and it's got to be demonstrated to trap it consistently, and not get any washout, as David showed, that you don't want washout afterwards. So those channels that I showed, we've shown that, and I'm sure that David's got evidence for his, and other manufacturers. I know Martin Fairley at ACO has probably got data for some of the things that they sell. Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's horses for courses. You've got to demonstrate that it's doing the job. Yeah.
Can I add one other thing? The permeable pavements actually help to take out fecal pathogens as well, which is really useful as far as our bathing water protection goes. So, you know, you're absolutely right, the metals are going to stay there, but the fecals is also important too. Give you a very quick update. It might be slightly quicker than you'd hoped for. As in the SUDS is not the team I'm responsible for. I sit near them, but I can tell you what I've picked up, that it's not coming in October. I think they promised a 6-month lead, did they, for this? And they're still going through the consultation responses. I think they received, well, 300 was it? Yeah, something like that. And coming in from very different directions. It'd probably be the commencement date. What would be the next commencement date? April, would it? I think. Something like that, maybe. So that's perhaps the next date they're going to look for. I can't comment on the change of the standards. I know there's been debate on this sort of affordability angle, which has been caused a lot of contention. But as for the rest of it, sorry, it's not my policy area. I wouldn't want to sort of lead you up the garden path, so to speak.
the owner or the operator of the site. So in Scotland, there's certainly loads of supermarkets, so in that situation, the supermarket will be responsible. If the road has been adopted, there's a guy behind you, Gordon there, is very experienced at adopting and maintaining permeable pavement, so he's probably the best person to speak to answer that question. Sorry for dropping you in it there. I can give you the technical. I only do technical. I don't do politics and who owns what. Technically, it's not a problem. But I think this whole discussion is bringing out something that I think is particularly stupid about the way drainage and highways and everything else is separated out. We just want one local authority, and Dave's a local authority man. I started off in a local authority. We want one local authority that's responsible for the lot, and it would get rid of a lot of these problems. But that's probably a bit contentious.
I presume you're talking about, when you say suds, you're talking about natural suds. Well, the proprietary, we could provide all the evidence that I think that you'd require. There's a lot of testing, as you see, with the downstream defender. Third-party authentication. 99.9% virtually capture rates. There's a lot of information available in terms of an application, particularly on a linear construction scheme, which I've worked on in the past, where land take can be an issue, costs can come into play, big balancing ponds if you have to do a compulsory purchase of land, then that can influence. So moving to a proprietary solution that's located in a verge that can be easily maintained might also influence. But in terms of performance and maintenance, we could answer most of those questions.
I think worldwide there is a lot of information, but one of the problems, and even in the UK, one of the problems is none of it is presented in a standard form. in particular. It's mainly in research papers, or it's held by manufacturers. And I think one of the things that would help in that aspect is to develop a standard form of presenting the data. Because there are tools that you can use. There's Music, which is a computer program from Australia that models pollution in drainage systems. So the tools are there, but it's getting the information to put it in, as you said.
And again, if you go to our website, there is information there on all the process. It's not standardised testing for all.
We've probably time for two questions. So there's a gentleman over there, and then a lady.
Absolutely. Can I just go back again to the 2006 technical mission? There were 2 water companies on that. The Environment Agency was on that, consultants, and there were manufacturers. And it was led by Professor Richard Ashley, who worked the group very, very hard for the 2-week period to get the output to put out as a formal report. And we just head scratched on exactly that point, and that's where we came up with the term, whose water is it? And we realised when we looked at say the control the city of Portland had, for example, which is a case study that I'm normally talking about, Portland, Oregon, the control the good people of Portland have on their water, generating their own income from sewage and sewerage charges. The expertise there, we realised that we've become so disparate, and we have taken a huge backward step in the UK. And perhaps the biggest stakeholder that can have an influence here is central government. Somebody has to change it, yeah. And we look again over the past few weeks, and it's still happening. Flood risk. So we're going to we'll probably get another inquiry, another paper, and we just seem to go around in circles. I absolutely, totally agree with you. With anybody.
It does need to be better coordination. I don't know what the future will hold. I'm not sure if it was even referenced in the water white paper, isn't it?
Not sure.
No.
Not sure.
But I take the point.
There's supposed to be a water bill supposed to be coming out today, but I don't think we've dealing with those issues. I think at the moment, because there's a lack of coordination of focuses on partnership and collaboration, but there's only so far you can go. If you look at what they've been able to do in the emerald cities in America, like Portland, like Philadelphia, like New York City, because, like you say, they own the sewer system and also the highways and can do green infrastructure, whereas the situations we're going to hear this afternoon is all about engagement between the local authorities and the water companies. So it's all about partnership and partnership funding, which is why we're trying to focus on
Just one more thought on the question of whose water. A couple of years ago, part of a flood risk scheme I was doing, I went to doing a flood risk assessment and a new development in an area that did flood. Was either fortunate or unfortunate enough to go and see a house. It was a little old lady that was watching TV one afternoon during the week when the River Tame overtopped its flood defences because a bridge upstream had been put in too low, and the river overtopped because the flooded channel hit the bottom of the bridge and pitched it over, and she was watching TV, and the River Tame came through her front door, and she had to be carried out, and there was a lot of photographs in the local press. And you know, for those kind of people and the people we've seen for the last few weeks, they don't care whose water it is. Doesn't matter to them, and aren't they the biggest stakeholder? So I think, you know, that's our biggest challenge is collectively, you know, from all sides, just trying to put pressure where we can, and try and influence and address what seems to be the biggest issue we've got is too many stakeholders and, you know, whose water. Anybody?